Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews, where I'm your host, John Delray. Of course, we are looking ahead at the Week 5 matchup between the Packers and the Rams today. Yes, the 1-3 Rams, and we're going to dive into a little bit why and what's going on with them. And let's just say this is not the team that they planned on having for the season yet. It's the one they've got right now. And a team in some relatively similar circumstances, at least for this week, would be the Green Bay Packers. So let's go right away into that injury report. It is lengthy. Yeah, you can see that the Packers side is much longer, but the Rams have got some stuff that's off that list. We're going to talk about that. So in terms of out for the Green Bay Packers, that would be breakout defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt. Not at all surprising. Packers still very much hoping to avoid an IR stint for Wyatt. Out this week, not surprising at all. Then getting doubtful tags would be Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. Now, very, very different reasons here as to why. One, I'm very optimistic about Christian Watson, actually, because when he went down, first of all, it looked really bad. But then second, they were talking high ankle sprain, most wide receivers miss a minimum of 2 weeks, etc. And I know he's not questionable, doesn't look likely at all that he's going to play, but still, for him to get the doubtful tag and not the out tag is, I think, really promising of the fact that LaFleur was telling the truth when he said Watson is pretty close. But then you also have the situation with Romeo Doubs, and we do not know what is going on with Doubs. It's not any of our business, to be frank. Matt LaFleur has said that he is out with a personal matter. They have hope that he will play on Sunday. LaFleur, when he talked yesterday on Thursday, even sounded optimistic that he would be there today, being Friday, and he wasn't. So, not quite sure what's going on there. Hoping just everything is okay with Romeo Doubs and his family. And then you get to the real long portion, the questionable area. And one name there is Jair Alexander, which Matt LaFleur said that he is getting better and he'll leave it at that. All right, thanks for the details. Then you've got Elton Jenkins also on the questionable list. When you ask Elton himself, as beat reporter said earlier this week at his locker, Elton said he's fine. So I'm inclined to believe that that's more on the probable side of things. Then you've got Edgerrin Cooper. Hopefully he can actually go. This is a great matchup for him if he's able to. Jordan Morgan continuing to work his way back from his shoulder injury. Even if Morgan can go, I'm not quite sure where he goes anymore with the vast improvement we've seen from Sean Ryan over the last 2 weeks. Then you do have Luke Musgrave as well. Very, very little has been said about his injury. Not sure where he's at. Carrington Valentine working his way back from his ankle injury. Hoping he can go, certainly. Looks to be trending that way for Carrington at the very least. And then you also have Jonathan Ford, who they have indeed opened up his practice window. He's not yet on the roster, so if they want to get him on the roster, they're going to have to make some moves. But Jonathan Ford continuing to work his way back as well. Notably on that list, two guys who are good to go, Kenny Clark and Jordan Love. No game designations for them. Looking at the Rams side of things. Now, it doesn't look that long. I know. But still a lot going on here. Cooper Kupp. Yeah, he's out. McVay has been very open about the fact that even though they're trying to avoid IR for Cooper Kupp, he's out this week assuredly. Then you've got Laurel Murchison, who is a defensive end. He has been declared as out. Honestly, just kind of a sad story here. Like, the guy was on IR. He's a depth defensive end for them. He was on IR. And then all of a sudden, earlier this week, they opened up his window trying to get him back from IR. And the dude broke his foot on Wednesday. And now he's going to have a new long injury road ahead of him again. But those are the two players who are formerly out. But don't let that fool you. The Rams are quite banged up because they still have starting tight end Tyler Higbee on the PUP. So he's obviously not going to go. Wide receiver Puka Nacua on IR, not going to go. Then they've got two of their starters on the interior offensive line, Jonah Jackson and Steve Avila, both on IR. John Johnson III, starting safety, on IR. Swing tackle Joe Nopum, IR. Yeah, it's a lot. One guy who also is still officially on IR but is expected to return would be their number one corner, Darius Williams. And we'll dive into what his return means in just a little bit. But that is the really, honestly, the first positive injury news that the Rams have gotten in a while. It's hard to say. The Rams have trotted out occasionally like third string offensive linemen. We oftentimes as Packer fans begroan the fact that we have all these injuries to deal with. One team that's not going to feel bad at all is the Rams because they have been beat up this year. So let's take a look at who the Rams are. Thus far, 1-3 on the year. Their only win came against the San Francisco 49ers, weirdly enough, and they've got losses against the Detroit Lions to open up the year. Then they were crushed by the Cardinals, and they lost to the Bears last week. As for who these Rams are, of course, still led by quarterback Matthew Stafford. He's still slinging it. Then at running back, Kyren Williams, the breakout star of last year, who still is doing a lot of great stuff this year. LaFleur talked about how incredibly tough he is as a runner to bring down, a very agile one-cut runner. The Rams have found another great running back there in Williams. Then looking at the wide receivers, obviously no Puka, no Cooper Kupp. But Tutu Atwell has really become their go-to guy in their absence. He is their leading receiver. Second on the team in that regard would be Demarcus Robinson. Tight end, you got Kobe Parkinson in lieu of Tyler Bigbie. And then their offensive line. Alaric Jackson is due to return. So they are not going to have to play Warren McClendon right there, who's gotten a lot of playing time in all of these other guys' absence. Alaric Jackson is due to return at left tackle. Logan Bruss, their left guard. Bo Limmer, the 6th-round pick, starting at center. Kevin Dotson, right guard. Rob Havenstein at right tackle. We're going to talk about all of them because they may have some impacts here. Then you've got the front. Kobe Turner's having a great season thus far. And then in their linebackers, you've got Byron Young, Troy Reeder, Jared Verse, certainly the most notable there. A premium draft pick for the Rams. Really probably their best pass rusher thus far on the year as well as being their highest graded run defender. So he is someone that the Packers line is going to keep track of all the time. And then you get into a secondary, again, a very banged up group. Darius Williams going to be making his season debut. Trey Tomlinson on IR. John Johnson on IR. It just goes on and on. So there you have it. That would be the Rams depth chart on the whole. As for where the Rams rank in their respective different things. On the defensive side of the ball, in terms of run defense, they're dead last. Dead last in the NFL. They allow 165.5 running yards against them per game. Over the last 3, it hasn't really gotten any better, 166.3. In terms of pass defense, they're a little bit better there. 20th in the NFL, giving up 219.8 yards per game through the air. However, over the last 3, as they've suffered a few more injuries, it's gotten a little worse, 226.3. In terms of points per game, they are giving up 28.8 points per game. That's 31st in the NFL. Now, that is buoyed up a little bit by when they got decimated by the Cardinals. The Cardinals put 41 points on them. Of course, when you're only looking at 4-game sample sizes, that drags the whole thing up a little bit. But it's still not good. Lions put up 26 against them, etc. There's been some other performances, at least in the mid-20s, to keep that kind of afloat at 28.8. And then in terms of red zone defense, now I've talked a lot about how the Packers are struggling in the red zone offensively. This could be a get-right game for them because they're 23rd in the NFL, are the Rams defensively in the red zone. 60% of the drives for them that make it into the red zone wind up in touchdowns against them. And I should say, they let teams into the red zone a lot. 26th in the NFL, allowing 3.8 red zone trips per game. Where the Rams rank offensively in terms of running the ball with Kyren Williams, because he is very much their feature back. I know they've got Blake Corum. I know they got Rivers, but Williams is their guy. Still, though, 28th in the NFL in terms of rushing yards per game and only 88.3. That does kind of track, though, with where they're at attempts-wise, because in terms of rush attempts, they're 25th in the NFL. So this is a team that just doesn't run much in spite of having Kyren Williams. Passing, though, that's their bread and butter. They are 9th in the NFL at 224 passing yards per game. But when you lose Cooper, when you lose Puka, the numbers seem to go down. So yeah, over the whole span of the season, a whopping 4 games thus far, they're 9th in the NFL, 224 yards. However, over the last 3, so 75% of the sample size, they dropped to 19th with only 197.7 yards per game, certainly influenced by their losses there. In terms of points per game, they're sitting at 23rd in the NFL. They put up only 18.8 points per game. And then in terms of red zone offense, they're right there with the Packers. 29th in the NFL, only 41% of their red zone trips turn into touchdowns. But the good news for the Rams is they get into the red zone a lot. They're 2nd in the NFL, getting into the red zone 4.3 times per game. That part they do better than Green Bay. As for just some general stats, turnovers, they're 22nd at -0.3. So they're actually on the losing side of the turnover margin. The Green Bay Packers still number 1 in the NFL in that regard. In terms of penalties, they are 10th in the NFL, getting only 5.5 flags against them per game. Green Bay's, they're a lot farther back on the list if you're wondering. Green Bay's still real bad at that. Sacks given up 23rd in the NFL. They give up 3.3 sacks per game. And then sacks gotten, they're 26th in the NFL at 1.8 sacks per game. So realistically, how exactly do the Packers combat this Rams team? How do they prepare for the Rams offense? And here's the thing. We've covered the injuries, right? The Rams are still really good at getting into the red zone and doing chunk plays. They have become a death by 1,000 paper cut offense without having all of their stars around. Because, and the reason why we know that, Kyren Williams, for how good of a running back he is, his longest carry on the year is 14 yards. Stafford, in spite of throwing for almost 1,000 yards over these 4 games, still only 12 of his 130 attempts have been over 20 yards. And that's just attempts. He's only completed 6 passes over 20 yards through 4 games. In addition, he's got only 2 big-time throws as tracked by PFF. Ultimately, 87 of the 130 attempts from Matthew Stafford have either been behind the line of scrimmage or within 9 yards of the line of scrimmage, especially with Tutu Atwell now as their leading receiver and Kyren Williams chugging along at only 3.5 yards per carry. They are matriculating the ball down the field in a way that would make Vince Lombardi proud. It is chunk play after chunk play, and they are good at it. They get into the red zone like I covered, but they just don't finish a lot. Some important info, though, about when they're into the red zone. It's all Williams from there. Stafford's only thrown for 2 touchdowns in his 4 games thus far. 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. One of those went to Kupp. The other one went to his running back, Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams also has 5 rushing touchdowns, which means you take the 1 receiving one, you take the 5 rushing ones, that gives him 6 touchdowns. The Rams have 7 offensive touchdowns on the year. Kyren Williams has gotten 6 of them. So, in looking at why the Rams are the way they are, it is completely reasonable to expect the Rams would completely pull everything back without Kupp, without Puka. And then in the red zone, it makes sense to go to Williams every time because you don't have Higbee or Kupp, right? Those are the guys that they use the red zone the most. So it makes all the sense in the world. But another reason as to why they're only throwing short passes, why Williams is only getting 3.5 yards per carry, could be their offensive line and how banged up it's been. This marks the 3rd straight week that the Green Bay Packers are going against what you could call as a substandard offensive line for pass blocking. They absolutely feasted against the Titans. They fell flat against the Vikings. That's been talked about a lot this week in different ways. Jeff Hafley even having to defend Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark. And we know the Packers pass rush hasn't been probably what it should be, especially against the Vikings. But this week they get an incredibly beat up Rams O-line. Like I talked about, Alark Jackson, he's coming back. He's going to be at left tackle. Well, his pass blocking efficiency rating is sitting at 95.1. Bruss, the left guard, 96.6. Limmer, 96.6. Dotson, their right guard, 96.9. And Hoppinston, their right tackle, the premier one of the bunch, at 97.3. If you are wondering, just to give you a scale for comparison here, because I'm talking about the Rams being deficient, talked about their sack numbers. Well, in terms of pass blocking efficiencies, here are the Packers' numbers. Rasheed Walker, 96.4. Elton Jenkins, 98.9. Josh Myers, 97.8. Sean Ryan, often considered the weakest of the bunch, 97.9. And then Zach Tom, 99.3. The Packers at every single position are at least 1, in some cases 2 full percentage points better than the Rams at pass blocking efficiency. Now, the Packers are one of the best pass blocking lines in the league, but the Rams happen to be one of the worst. So there are 2 reasons for optimism, though. I did want to get this out there. One, as I mentioned, Alark Jackson, he's coming back at left tackle. McClendon, the guy who's been filling in for Jackson, has been rough diddly is basically the biggest phrase that comes to mind with that. He's been leading the Rams in how many sacks given up. His grades on PFF are the worst. His pressure numbers were the worst. So they are getting an upgrade in Alaric Jackson, even if it's not prime David Bakhtiari walking in. In addition, though, they also are getting some good production from Bo Limmer. Now, I did talk about how like his numbers aren't great overall, but he's had these like single standout performances thus far, like the graphic shows here from the 33rd team. He was in amongst the best for rookie offensive linemen in terms of pressure rate for week 3. And there's even conversation in amongst the Rams fandom about, hey, when Jonah Jackson comes back, or when last year's second round pick Steve Avila comes back, are we really going to bench Bo Limmer for one of them? Because Limmer's been doing better. Like, he has been improving. He's had great standout weeks like week 3. But on the whole, he still has been kind of deficient for a center in terms of pass blocking. So on Sunday, against a very, very opportunistic Green Bay Packers defense, I would expect the Rams to get pretty darn conservative and continue to try to chunk their way down the field. Making the easy throw difficult for Stafford will be a key for Green Bay. I'm not going to make it as simplistic as like, they got to get after him. No, because even though he's at about a league average rates and times to throw, we know the Packers may not get after him. Like, Stafford's an incredibly good quarterback, and he'll get it out quicker if he needs to. So I'm just going to say, make those easy throws at least somewhat difficult for him. As for stopping Kyren Williams, he's averaging 3.5 yards per carry on this young season. Keep that relatively within frame, and all should be just fine. Frankly, for both of those things, having Edgerrin Cooper back would be a huge boon for Green Bay. This, when I was going over it all and looking at the numbers, this just felt like a game. Like Edgerrin Cooper could really come in with his speed, with his athleticism, with his knack for being around the ball that we've seen. This could be a great game for him, really hoping he goes. Same can be said for the Packers' other rookie in the secondary, Javon Bullard. As for the Rams defense, this is not the prime Rams defense in the days of Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. Nay. I would expect the Packers to run a lot. The Rams have the worst run defense in the NFL. Dobbs and Watson are both doubtful for various reasons. The Packers still have Reed, still have Melton, still have Heath and Kraft. But still, the Rams have a difficulty, like really bad, with two things. One is stopping the run, and the other is tackling. In their front seven, there are two players that really do look like young stars in the making. One would be edge Jared Verse, the other would be defensive lineman Kobe Turner. But they both have one fatal flaw. See, Jared Verse, the Rams rookie edge, is the Rams' top graded run defender. That grade's still only sitting at like 73. And he's done an excellent job rushing the passer. He's got 12 quarterback hurries, 4 hits, 1 sack, but the dude can't tackle so far in his NFL career. His missed tackle rate is sitting at a beautiful, for the Packers, 39%. To go along with that, Kobe Turner on the line, actually hand in dirt. He's got a ridiculous 17 quarterback hurries thus far. Yeah, that's QB hurries, not pressures. Hurries that Turner has. But he's only turned that into 6 tackles and a missed tackle rate of 35%. When your top 2 players in the front 7 are missing nearly 40% of their tackles, it's going to make for some real long days for your run defense, and it has for the Rams. Honestly, though, their tackling woes, it goes even deeper. There have been 17 players on the Rams defense that have gotten more than a single tackle this year. Of those 17, 12 of them have missed tackle rates over 10%. I'm going to say that again. 17 guys have more than one tackle. 12 of those 17 have missed tackle rates more than 10%. Of the 5 that don't have tackle rates above 10%, you could say like 3 could be considered starters. 2 have low tackle and snap numbers. Backing up into the Rams secondary, though, the Rams actually have a pretty large question they need to figure out, and this was covered really well by the Rams Wire. Now that their top corner, Darius Williams, is coming back, where do you put him, and who's going to move for him? And the question isn't necessarily just because the Rams' pass defense has been great. It's more so just, what do we do with this guy now? And like the Rams wire broke down, there are really three options here. One, you could bench Tre'Davious White, who's been bad in darn near every single metric. As Aaron Schatz, one of the gurus of DVOA, he put out last week, like, here's who's doing well in DVOA, who's etc., who's not doing great. And then the worst coverage DVOA in the league happens to go to former All-Pro cornerback Tre'Davious White. Now, maybe you're a DVOA skeptic. Okay, he's got a coverage grade of 49 per PFF. Okay, maybe you're a PFF skeptic. That's fine. His quarterback rating when targeted, 147.8. By the way, in 4 games, he's also given up 4 passing touchdowns. Pick a stat. Honestly, pick a stat. They've all been bad for Tre'Davious White through 4 weeks. Or another option that the Rams have at their disposal would be that they could bench rookie Cameron Kitchens at safety and move Quentin Lake, who has been playing their slot corner, move him back to safety, then move Durant into slot corner, etc. Really dives into the Rams roster there as to what their options are. And benching White, honestly, given his stats, it may be the cleanest option. He also is the one guy who's bucking the missed tackle trend, as he has 10 tackles on the year and not a single missed tackle. They're going to bench the one dude who could tackle, apparently. And I should note, too, for what it's worth, Lake, who's been their slot corner, who may get switched to safety, we got to see, he's had their best coverage grade out of all players in the secondary thus far, at 53. Yeah, that's right. The best coverage grade in that secondary thus far has been 53. In spite of that, I do expect the Packers to run. But when they do air it out, if they can block Turner and Verse and Frisk, and again, the Rams don't have huge sack numbers, but these guys are good at affecting the quarterback. If they can block those 3, which I don't doubt that they can, Love should be able to have a very, very efficient day. Not some kind of 400-yard, 4-touchdown explosion, but think back to the number of games last year, where Love was at like 230 yards and 2 touchdowns and no picks. There were like 10 of those last year, and they weren't just in the second half of the year. It could very well be that kind of performance for Jordan Love. So ultimately, look, I know the game is in LA. I know the Packers could potentially be down a whole lot of talent. Yeah, so are the Rams, but the Packers really could be missing some guys. It's important we acknowledge that. But on a talent level, even with who is expected to play, the Packers do appear to be the superior team. And on every statistical level, they absolutely are the superior team. I don't know if it's possible for just a meaningless little podcaster to grow complacent and overlook a team, but this kind of feels like a situation where I may be doing that. The Rams are scrappy. They are talented, but boy, the numbers show this has not been a great 1-3 team thus far. I don't want to say that this could be a get-right game for Green Bay, because Green Bay doesn't have that much going wrong, but it could very well be a get-into-rhythm game for Green Bay, in spite of not having Watson, or likely Dobbs, or even Musgrave. This is a game where efficiency can become the key, where for the Packers, it's maybe time to work on that whole discipline thing we've been talking about so that you don't get 10 flags a game. Could be a game to clean up that kind of thing. I do think the Packers should win this game, and relatively handedly. So I'm going to say Packers 34, Rams 20, and the Packers finally beat the Rams in LA for the first time since the late 60s. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining me. I will see you on Sunday. Remember, 3:25 Lambeau time is this game. It's a late kickoff. It's not a noon game. It's a late one. But Claudia and I will be here for a watch party, hanging out, talking with you fine folks during the game. Thanks, everybody. Hope you are having a fantastic weekend. And as always, go Pack, go.